Parents as teachers, and behind-the-scenes look at a local pastor, Richard Cox. All that and more coming up now on Joy in the City, True Stories. Joy in the City is a program highlighting people and organizations having an impact in our city. All too often, we hear about the problems and the dysfunction in our culture, but we are coming with a different approach as we take a look at the good things that are going on right now in our community. I'm Lindsay Irvin, and you're about to see what God is doing in our city. We want to thank our program sponsors, Park Home, for the donation of furniture used in our studio, Made by Vogel for the contribution of many props in our studio, and our platinum sponsor, Harry's Construction, for their ongoing support of Joy in the City. Parents as Teachers has a vision that all children will grow and develop to reach their full potential. We recently had the opportunity to speak with Denise Adams as she explains this program provided by the Family Resource Center.
Hi Denise, we brought you in today to explain to us what Parents as Teachers is, and I have to say I was really shocked at what that was because it wasn't anything like I thought it was going to be. So,
well, let me tell you a little bit about it then. Parents as Teachers is an evidence-based home visiting program. So that part is, you understood that part, right? We're
absolutely,
visiting people.
Yes.
Okay. The difference between what we were talking about earlier and what it actually is that we visit families with children prenatally to kindergarten entry. So it's any family that falls within that age range that has a need for parenting, okay? We're parent educators is what we call ourselves, or home visitors. Family development specialists are our fancy title. But when we go into these homes, we do three things. We encourage parent-child interaction. So we might take a bag that has some activities in it, and we will present them to you on the table, and you will work with your child, and we will just coach you through that. We also look at developmental centered parenting, and that is looking at your child at their age and then trying to understand what's going through their head. How can I best help them learn? So we're really focusing on the child. We're helping you focus on your child. And the last piece of that is family well-being. So family well-being can be anything. It can be that you have some health issues in your home. It can be that you have some needs. You might be in a crisis at this time, or it could be a need such as, I'm not getting enough food in here. We help you find the resources that you need. So for instance, if you have a child in that age group, we might refer you to WIC. We might refer you to early intervention if your child maybe is not really up to par where they should be. That's where that developmental centered parenting comes in. We do assessments on your children. We help you understand their development. We help you set goals and then find the resources for those. It's a very non-invasive program. It's mostly voluntary. The families that we work with, as long as they're in that age group, we can work with any families. And we work with families that sometimes have some issues. Maybe they don't have their children currently, and we're trying to help them get their children back. Maybe early intervention has said that they really don't have a speech issue, but you're still feeling that you just need a little bit more help. We're there to help you for that as well. It could be a family that maybe you had your children later in life and you are really confused on what to do with an 18-month-old or a 2-year-old, or you're not even sure about the basics. Those are the families that we're really trying to reach.
Who are we? Like when you say we, what are their qualifications? Are they teachers? Are they nursing staff?
Well, there are some programs that have nursing staff. We're a mixture. Right now, the current staff, we have 3 full-time parent educators. One has a medical background. One was a teacher, and the other one has worked in human development and family studies. So they all have bachelor's degrees. Parents as Teachers is a nationally accredited program, so we all have their training as well. We work with 2 age groups there. We work prenatally to 3 years old, and then 3 years old to kindergarten entry. We're getting them ready for school. I think the families that we work with would tell you that each of us have our own special gifts, but we're there for all of them. You might have just one parent educator, but once a month, we also have a group activity. So you get to meet all of us. So maybe I know a little bit more, I'm not the medical background person, but maybe I know a little bit more about the medical background and you might want to pick my brain. The other nice thing about this program is there's a ton of resources. It is a full curriculum, and in that, there's information about all of those needs and things that you might be asking about. And we confer with each other as well.
How do you go about getting into people's homes? Are you recommended?
There's a mixture. Sometimes it's because this family had one of us in their home and they said, you should call Miss Julie, or you should call Miss Amola, or Miss Barb would be great. Let's see if we can get her to work with you. Sometimes we work with children and youth. We work with reunification programs such as FIX and the Bear Foundation. We work with early intervention programs like North Star and Kids First. Any family that really needs maybe another kind of help, we're there for those families. We're also in that national Parents as Teachers, and you can look that up online. We're a Blue Ribbon affiliate, which means that we're meeting the highest standards of that program.
I did see that this is actually an international
It is.
group.
It is.
Which was very impressive to me.
We, three of us were able to go to a conference a few years ago, and it was in Philadelphia, and that's why we were able to go, because it was closer and we could take the train, and it was the perfect mix. But we met so many people from so many different places. Even to Philly, there were people there from Hawaii, there were people there from England. Parenting, we parent differently based on our child. You know, you have children of your own, your children are probably very different from each other. You probably had to do things slightly different. The one thing that we know is that parents love their children and they want the best for them. That's the common denominator, really. And if we can help you find those other needs, maybe you just need help with toilet learning, or maybe they're throwing so many tantrums you just don't know what to do with yourself, and it's probably developmentally appropriate. So yeah, we're there for those families, any family.
And I was thinking too, you know, with autism being kind of a forefront thing right now, you would be so extremely helpful for parents.
I think
in
we're
that
another.
realm.
Yeah, I think we're another support for families with
Yeah.
children with autism. I think that sometimes, you know, we might see something in your child that you're not quite seeing yet. We might say to you, I think we need to have early intervention involved. Maybe there's a little bit more. And that diagnosis for autism is a long and lengthy one. You know, we can be that support then. Even after the fact, you know, if maybe you just need some help, maybe you have more than one child. That's the other thing. We work with any child in that age zone in your home. So maybe you just need support for one of your other kids, or the one that has autism.
So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes
Okay.
to tell people out there, if they're at home and they're struggling or they just need another set of eyes. Sometimes that's difficult.
It is.
That's difficult for a parent to say, I'm not doing this, right? Or I need help, but you don't want to reach out to that. To me, it's kind of invasive.
Right.
So what do you say to that, to get people to understand that you're not coming in there to pass judgment, you're just coming in there to help them get to where they need to be?
I think the biggest thing is that if you're hesitant about whether or not you'd want to be involved in our program, you know, and I do understand that. You know, I had children of my own. I now have grandchildren. If you're hesitant about that, we would invite you to one of our group activities so that you can see the families that we work with. Maybe you could talk to some of those families. The other thing, you can talk to us and we can explain to you specifically what the program looks like. When I say we take a bag in, most of the families we work with feel that we're their child's teacher. In a way we are, you know, we're helping them, but we're really just trying to help the parent as well. If I would explain to you what we bring in the bags, we bring a book at every one. Most of the times you get to keep the book. We bring maybe a puzzle, the activity of the day. That could be something as simple as we're going to play in rice and play with things today, or it can be we're going to finger paint and make a mess. You know, it's something fun for you to do with your child. I think once you get to that point, you're going to understand why it's such a good program. I wish I had known about it. The program has been here in Blair County since 1995. My youngest would have been about 4 years old, and he was something. And I probably could have used a little bit of parenting advice at that time. I think we're a little bit different than a parent or a family member telling you what to do. We have research and we have information, great handouts. It really backs up the information that we're giving you. So just, I guess, call one of us. We'll try to talk you into it. I can't say enough good things about it.
It sounds wonderful, and I'm just glad to have had you here today. You're like another resource to put in our library here.
Wonderful.
That we can pull from as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you know a person or an organization impacting our city, we want to hear about it. You can contact us at 814-944-1948 or by email at stories@jointhecity.org.
Today's Platinum sponsor is Harry's Construction, whose motto is, "If you can dream it, we can create it." Recently opening Harry's Construction Kitchen and Bath Center so you, the consumer, can see examples of the variety of services provided by the team at Harry's Construction. Regardless of the project size, Harry's team approaches each project as if it is his own home. Be sure to visit Harry's Construction Kitchen and Bath Center at 114 Main Street in Bellwood. You can also visit their website to see pictures of home improvement projects over the years. Thanks again to Harry Halk and the team for supporting Joy in the City.
Today we get a behind-the-scenes look at Pastor Richard Cox. He is the pastor of Overflow Church in Altoona, Pennsylvania.
I'm an avid reader. I love to read. I've read 26 books so far this year in 2021. That's where I spend a lot of my free time in the evening. I love to travel. Prior to moving to Altoona, I was usually working on about 3 international trips at a time. And I've lived in 4 countries on 3 continents. Well, growing up in a pastor's home and as a 4th generation missionary, my grandparents, all of my aunts and uncles on my mom's side and my great-grandparents and were all in ministry. And so I first sensed a call to be a missionary at the age of 5. And by 7, I was saving my money so I could go to Africa on a mission trip for a year when I turned 16 to visit my aunt. I told my parents I was going to go there for a year with or without them. And growing up, that consumed me. By the time I got to about 14, 15, I had enough money saved up because I literally saved every penny that I made during odd jobs or birthdays or whatever, that I had enough money to go. And I told my parents I was going. And to make a long story short, my dad had gone with the youth group to an Acquire the Fire convention, thinking that he was taking the youth so that they could hear from God. And God spoke to my dad that our family was supposed to go to Africa. And so we ended up moving to Africa when I was 16, which was an amazing experience. I loved every minute of it. And 1 year turned into 3 for me and 8 for my family that they were in Africa. And as much as I loved Africa, I can't even begin to describe how much I love Africa. But while I was there, I started sensing that God was calling me to be a missionary in North America. And that was something that I really, really struggled with because in my mind, everyone in America had heard the gospel. I grew up in the church, and my concept of America was that we were a prodigal nation, that people had heard the gospel, they just chosen to reject it. And so that set me on a several-year journey of just wrestling with God. Like, God, you either call me to be a pastor or you call me to be a missionary. But if you're calling me to be a missionary, I need to go international because that's where missionaries go. Missionaries don't go to North America. And that just continued this wrestling. And after attending the Bible college in Swaziland for 2 years, I transferred to a Bible college in Canada, Kingswood University, where I studied global ministry, convinced that God was calling me to be a missionary. And so I was going to do global ministry. And the whole time I was there, God just continually confirmed He's calling me to be a missionary, but He's calling me to North America. And I just didn't understand it. Like, I was just like, I just don't get it, God. And so kind of, there was a season where I called it my Jonah experience, but now I realize it was God orchestrating things. But I signed up for an internship in Central Asia, and I thought, well, maybe God just doesn't want me in Africa. I'll go work with Muslims in Central Asia. And I did a 5-month internship there. I loved it. Like, I was teaching English, which I was surprised that I actually enjoyed that because that was never my favorite subject. And hanging out with guys that I was developing relationships with and getting to share Jesus with them. And the whole time, like, I couldn't get away from this sense that God was still calling me back to North America. And I'll never forget, there was a kind of a defining moment. This was back before video messaging, and I was instant messaging with my parents, and I just made the comment that to my parents, because I was really wrestling, because I was like, I knew down deep in my heart God was calling me back to North America, but everything in me, I wanted to be international. And I told my mom, I wish that God would just give me a Post-it note and just tell me what I'm supposed to do. Like, I hate all this vagueness. Like, I just want to know what I'm supposed to do. And her response was, maybe he already has. And in that moment, I realized that I knew exactly what I was supposed to do. And there was a church in Clearfield that had offered me an opportunity to do a 2-year residency with them as an outreach pastor, which I accepted. And at the time, I was convinced that I was going there for 2 years. This was just God getting this out of my system, and then I would go international, and that maybe God just didn't want me to go overseas without pastoral ministry experience. So I was going to go 2 years, check it off, and then God would let me go. And that turned into 5.5 years. And during that season, God began to open my eyes to how many people lived within that community, which I would have viewed as a Christian community, that had never heard the gospel. We started doing a backyard club at a local housing development, and like week after week, the kids would be like, they never ever heard these stories before. I mean, stories like Daniel in the lion's den and David and Goliath, and you're like, I thought everybody knew these stories, and starting to realize that, they were within walking distance of our church, and yet we in the church were totally oblivious to them. And so God started opening my eyes and breaking my heart, and eventually came to a place where I felt God released me from ministry there at Hyde, and they sent us to Altoona to plant Overflow with a vision to be a sending church. I really feel God has called me to devote my attention to walking with individuals as they hear a call to go wherever it is that God calls them, and send them. So in the last, I guess it's 8 years now, we've had 17, I think, that have experienced a call of some sort that we've sent or helped start that journey towards ministry. And we've started 3 new churches in the past year that we're just continually focused on raising up and sending out, believing that ultimately that's how we'll have the greater impact in the region. Yeah, it definitely creates a different feel for a church environment, because we're far more concerned with mobilizing. I mean, I've been telling our people, like, you're always welcome to invite people here, but if you really want to get me excited as a pastor, I would rather you tell me you started a Bible study at work and you're walking through the Gospel of John over the next year, even if that person never comes to Overflow in the meantime. Because one of the things that I have found over and over again is that when people invite their friends to church, they assume they pass the baton and now it's someone else at church's responsibility to lead that person to Christ. But if someone comes for a period of time or several weeks and doesn't really have someone walking with them in discipleship, and they don't encounter Jesus in a life-transforming way in that season, then they eventually just kind of fade off and disappear. On the flip side, one of the things that I've just continually found over and over is that once someone has a true life-transforming encounter with Jesus, you never have to invite them to church ever again. Like, the people that have a radical life-transforming encounter with Jesus, like, they're there every time the doors open. Like, we need volunteers for this or that. Like, they're there, and we've become so focused on, in the North American culture, of just invite. And I think that there's a place for that and there's a role for that, but I'm becoming more and more convinced that we'll have a greater impact if we really mobilize our people to live out the gospel where they live, work, and play. And like one of the things that I'm becoming more convinced of as we're on this journey is that we don't start churches. We don't plant churches. Jesus never said go and start churches. He said go and make disciples. But one of the things that we have this unwritten rule in the North American context that says if our church leads someone to Christ, they belong to our church. And I really wrestle with that because it's like, who says they belong to our church? They belong to the kingdom. They belong to God. They're a part of the church. But what if God's plan isn't for them to be a part of the church? And so one of the things we're really trying to do is create an environment where discipleship is the highest priority, and getting them into discipleship, and then really begin to identify where is God moving and where's God connecting. Right now, we're living in the midst of one of the greatest awakenings the world has ever seen. I mean, the global church is exploding. I mean, there's 651 movements that are being tracked internationally. But what's interesting when you look at where the church is exploding, one of the things you find is what is often referred to as oikos planting, church planting, which is when they lead someone to Christ, instead of trying to connect them into a new church, they always ask, well, who in your network of friends doesn't know Jesus? Why don't you invite them over to your house? And rather than pulling someone out of their network of friends, we put the church in their network of friends, and that actually becomes the new church. And so that's what we've been doing. We've seen that happen in Coalport with a family that came to our grand opening, moved back to the community they'd grown up in, and felt God calling them to live as missionaries there. And as much as they loved Overflow, the people that they were ministering to and serving and in their community, they didn't have any relationships with people at our church. So why are they going to drive 30 minutes to church down the mountain? And so we just began saying, okay, well, maybe this is actually going to be a church. And so now they've been meeting since they launched online last Easter during the shutdown, and then they've been meeting in person and are planning for a more public launch this fall. But they have that group that's really come together as a church. And same thing happened here in Altoona. We had a family that started a backyard club at Izzy Park across town, which is really only 15 blocks from our church. And it wasn't long. That club exploded. They had 75 to 95 people come into club every week. But it was interesting because God was moving in a powerful way in that club. People were starting to talk about that club as going to church because they're hearing the gospel. They're hearing stories about Jesus. Discipleship was starting to happen. Bible studies were happening. But nobody from that club was showing up to Overflow on Sunday. And normally in church world, we're like, well, you guys are a failure because what you're doing, nobody's showing up on Sunday, so we're not going to put any more resources in it. Where we just flipped things and said, well, maybe this is supposed to be its own church. And so if people aren't going to come across town because they've already got that network of friends, I mean, they're already beginning to function as a church, why don't we see how we can get the church as close to them as possible? And so rather than just continually getting a bigger and bigger space, we want to just continue to give people permission to kind of go where God leads. And sometimes people start things and people do connect. And like we've had lots of people that as they've started living on mission, the people that they've connected with have ultimately got connected in our church. I mean, there's far more that have connected into Overflow because of someone living on mission than have started a new church. But just giving space to say, God's the one that gets to decide if this is a church or not. Why are we going to fight it? And we're not going to measure our success by how many people are in this building, but by rechurching the area. Because ultimately, I think that's where we'll see the most transformation.
As we close out today's show, here are a few thoughts from our director, Troy Ferguson.
Responding with respect. Today's thought comes from a memory on Facebook from 2 years ago that couldn't be more applicable today. You see, at the time I was watching several news stations concerning politics. Everything from Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and others. I saw something that night for the first time, and I don't know if I've seen it since. At the time I was watching Fox News, and there was someone who was on there that had a very liberal perspective, and she came in with an argument that was very intelligent and in a respectful manner. It was a viewpoint without a harsh slant towards an agenda. Now, I didn't agree with most of what she had to say, but I greatly appreciated her approach. I actually listened with consideration to her point of view. Props to her. Almost all of what is shared concerning politics, the coronavirus, racial injustice today, on television, on social media, and even in person, everything seems so extreme, so harsh, and so disrespectful. It's painful to watch, and I'm talking both sides. This reminded me that we need to be respectful and courteous when responding to something or someone we disagree with. Disrespect and rudeness shows more of our lack of intelligence and maturity than it does to prove our perspective. In the Bible, Ephesians 4:32 reads, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you." Galatians 6:10 reads, "As we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers." Lastly, 1 Peter 3:9 says, "Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called so that you may inherit a blessing." As I said when I started, this was a Facebook post I wrote 2 years ago. But from some of the things I've read on Facebook just this week, I see this as even more needed today than it was then. I encourage strong perspectives and strong opinions and points of view. But when responding on social media or even in person, we must respond with respect. Let me encourage you to even take a beat and think before we speak. Let's ask God to give us wisdom in our responses. Now, continue to dream big, be kind, and go bless someone this week.
That's all the time we have today. Thanks for watching Joy in the City, True Stories. Let me encourage you to watch other episodes of people and organizations having an impact in our community on ABC 23 at 5:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. every Sunday. You can also catch us each week on our Facebook page or YouTube channel. And until then, be encouraged because God is moving in our city.